managed to lose contacts when I really could kick myself. So just having an organized method, whether it's on your phone or whether it's on a spreadsheet or something where you can always find any kind of leads that you get and not lose those people. So, okay, so this is lead generate for your business. So this slide has to do with this daily force. So they also have scripts in here, and this, and I don't know what page number this is for you, but they have some scripts for calling personal and professional services. We won't go through those scripts today, but what I would say to you is that one of the assets that you can provide to your database, and that it helps build your credibility, is to start to accumulate people that do certain tasks. For example, who can do a well test on something that somebody has, a septic tank and a well. And a lot of these contacts you'll find on the KWRES Facebook page, that people, other agents, and these will be seasoned agents that reach out to others and ask them, who do you know that does X, Y, or Z? And every time that I see one of those, I capture those names and I keep them on a list. And so when I do some of my monthly mailings, and I do my postcard mailings through Trenda, who I don't believe that she's working in the office building these days. I think she's continuing to work from home, but she had an office there at KWR, and she does mailers. She does my signs. She does my directionals that I have made up that have my name and telephone number on. And she keeps track of my database. And so I send her new people, and then I review it each month and take off people that have either moved, or if I know that they've something's gone up with them that I just want them off my list, then I update that. And usually it's only a few updates that go with it. But I do send that out as a monthly mailing in a postcard form. And you have the back side of that, it's just called the backer. And so I often, if I can't think of something really brilliant to say on the back of that, I offer up that if you need a recommendation for a plumber, for an electrician, a handyman, a house cleaner, I say, give me a call and I can help. And you'd be surprised how many people will call you and say, I don't have anything, I'm not buying or selling today, but can you give me the name of your plumber? And what you want to do as part of your resume is you want to become a source of information for your client base or your database, or data bank as they like to call it these days. So I didn't do this in your book where it has scripts for calling professional services. But once I got started and started using some of these people, for example, one that comes to my mind is Jim's Handyman Service. And his name is really misleading because he does flips and they can do complete remodels and everything. So one of the first listings that I had was a condo that it had to have the bathroom gutted. It was a 2-bedroom condo, needed the bathroom gutted, and it needed to be painted inside and out. And it also needed new laminate flooring put down throughout. So I recommended them to the seller. They did good work for me. And so I have used them a number of times, even for my sellers when they have, for example, get into the repair addendum part and I need to have some repairs done. Then I will call Jim and see if they can work me in to do those repairs. So having a database for yourself of referrals, and you may not ever get a referral back from them, but part of that is just becoming a good resource for your client base. So I'll skip through that. And a blank page, well, I can do a blank page pretty well. Okay. All right, so it doesn't give me a reference for what page you're on. It's giving me page 11. It says, get your head in the game. Is that the same page that you're on? Okay, great. So it says for me to discuss each of these NAR statistics with you. And maybe we have, so let's see, action reveals of one where, okay, that's probably not where we want to be. All right, we'll just ignore that for up there. So, one of the things that I really like about these statistics, and this is a statistic that I use all the time, and that's the second one, that tells your buyers that, or well, really tells your sellers, 92% of the buyers will use the internet in their home search process. So one of the things, and I'll give you an example. I have a listing that I went active on Tuesday of last week. And by Wednesday afternoon, I called off and I set a time that everybody had to have their offers to me by 3 o'clock, because I was getting, I had so much activity, I couldn't handle it all. And they were really good offers, so I didn't need to extend that time period. But one of the things that made that house so attractive to people, and it was an older house, it was built in 1957, but it was on a big lot. But when I walked in, the house was, the kitchen was, and it will help you to know that the seller was 93 years old, and she liked bright colors. And you'll find that as you go along in your journey of selling real estate, that a lot of the older people, they grew up during the Depression, and so colors were pretty bleak, and they love bright colors. Well, her kitchen was lime green, as well as her laundry room. And the living room was sort of a burnt orange, and the hallway was a mauve color. So I said to the daughters that were helping me, I said, this house is not going to look good on a cell phone. And lime green is not going to be attractive to anybody when they pull it up on their cell phone, and people will pass by this house. And that is because, back to the statistic, that 92% of the buyers are going to look at that home or that listing either on a cell phone or their laptop. So having statistics to be able to repeat these confidently, either to a seller or a buyer, will really help you in your career as a broker. So it says 50% of the buyers use a mobile website or application in their home search. And I often share my KW app with buyers. I haven't found them to use it a lot. They go to their favorite sites, whether it's realtor.com or Zillow or something, but I still offer them that app and let them use it if they will. 98% of the buyers who used an agent viewed their real estate agents as a useful information source. And that gets back to not only the buying process for your buyers, but also just if they need a resource, like the examples I gave, like a plumber or an electrician. More than 50% of the buyers reported finding the right home was the most difficult step in the home buying process. And I would almost venture to say that getting your offer accepted is more than 50% of the problem, or the what they have to deal with today, because that is, they may find the right house, and they may find the right house repeatedly and not get their offer accepted. So this year has been an extraordinarily difficult year and different year. But I have to say, I have had probably half of my transactions, whether it was representing the sellers or whether I was out there with the buyers looking for properties, I have found that I've had a lot of transactions with first-time home buyers this year. So in both of these listings that I just had last week, the buyers were first-time home buyers. So I would just say to you, in working with your buyers, don't let them be discouraged that they may not get the home, because they will, with the right agent helping them and having the right strategy. And of course, it helps if they have the right budget. That's always the key part to that. So before I finish this list, does anybody have any questions before I just continue on?
It's not a question, but I'm not sure that the slide that you're showing is the slide that you're reading off of.
Yeah, I think
this
that's
one just
true,
says action reveal.
Yeah, let me look and see if I don't think I have a slide for that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Right,
so
got you.
Yeah, and let me just click through that, because this daily 10-4, we already did that.
I think it's number 7.
Yeah, so this is page 8 through 9. So I guess I can, no wonder I didn't. Thank you for pointing that out, by the way. Okay, so getting your head in the game. So that's where these NAR statistics that we have. So now I'm up to speed. Thank you for that. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to interrupt me. Okay, 9% of the people purchased a new home due to a job-related relocation or move, and 8% bought for their desire to be in a better area or change their family situation. And what I find today too, you have a fair amount of people that in the older sellers that are wishing to downsize. And the beauty part about that is if they aren't going into a managed facility, then you can get a buy and a sell with that. So I have yet to, well, I've only had it a couple of times that has happened, but it's sure nice when it does, particularly if you have capped. That's very sweet. Okay, any questions about the statistics? Okay, so let's see here. All right, so find homes. So we've already gone over those statistics. So let's see. It says, there's no doubt your buyers will be searching for homes through the internet on their own. And that says through a buyer consultation helped establish exactly what the buyers are looking for in their dream home, and then leverage that criteria using online property searches to find several homes for your buyers. And so the first step they talk about is setting up this buyer notification through the multiple listing system. I have not done that very much. I have done it for people that are looking for things like vacant lots and that, but I find that the system doesn't allow me to pinpoint and sometimes they just get too many things and they get too confused by it. So I do it differently. And one of the things about real estate is that you can take all of this information as a guide, and then you can figure out what works best for you. If you're satisfied that you can pinpoint with the multiple listing service down so that your clients can receive these notifications of new properties on the market and you're happy with that and your clients are happy because they'll tell you if they're getting too many emails and don't like it. So what I do is I get up in the morning and when I'm on the hunt for a buyer, and my business is about, this year is 50-50 buyers and sellers. And I like it that way because I never lose touch with how I can service buyers. And I also never lose touch with what it takes for the buyers to get, or the sellers to get the most price out of their house. For example, the lime green kitchen paint and the burnt orange, those kind of things that will, those will be no-brainers for you. If you can't get them to paint something like that, then you just can't and you move on and sell the house. But so anyway, but what I do is I prefer to set up my own searches, and I get up in the morning and then I'll fire off some of these searches that I think is a better fit for them. They will do their own searches and they will often send you, hey, I like this one, I found this. And I encourage them to do that because sometimes they will opt for something that doesn't quite meet the criteria that they gave you. And in this fast moving market, I run with it. I know that it talks in some of this details about if they want to look at a house that doesn't meet their 5 must-haves, that then you have to revisit what you're looking for. Well, the truth is that in this kind of market, some of these houses are only lasting a few days on the market. You don't have the benefit of being extremely picky, particularly when we have been dealing with anywhere from 2 weeks to 4 weeks worth of inventory. And that's across all price points. And it's been like that for Eugene for the entire year. And that means that we having the lowest inventory in the whole state, we don't have a lot to choose from. So sometimes they have to give up some of those and they have to be flexible. And so do you as their agent. It doesn't hurt anything to send them some of these things that you say, hey, check this one out, because it gives you the option down there on those client pull reports to write them a note, go, hey, don't know if this works for you, but it had, I like this about it or whatever. And you'll develop a rapport with your buyers and, they can give you total thumbs down or whatever. So, you'll work that out and you'll figure that out as you go along. But just know that you can adapt this system. You can kind of work this out to whatever you feel the most comfortable with. So it says monitor what your buyers receive from your KW website and your app through your back office tools. And I don't do that, but I think it's a great idea. I don't do it. So contact them when you find a property that they should see, and likewise, they're going to do the same, which is what I just said. So on to page 14. Now it says continue to check in periodically to see what your buyers think of homes in their search. Here's what I have found, particularly in this market that we struggled with this year. And it's been a great year. I have represented buyers in Portland this year. I've represented sellers in Portland. I have represented buyers finding a home for them in Albany. And that required me to join temporarily the Willamette Valley Multiple Listing Service, because those people that list the houses up there, 80% of them are only through Willamette Valley. It's cheap to join. They don't make you, they don't have any kind of origination fee that they charge you or joining fee. And it was $45 a month. And then it got you into their lockbox because they don't have Century Lock. They have a different lock called Supra. And they weren't able to give one-day codes. They're just starting to develop it there. And some of the agents know how to give you a one-day code and some of them don't. So it was worth it to me to pay $11 a month for the access to the Supra lock boxes and $45 a month for the Willamette Valley multiple listings, so that I could send my client houses that I thought we should look at. In this particular instance, my buyer was buying in the $500,000 range. And so that's why I say that. I want you to know that sometimes investing in selling a property, you say, well, why would I want to join that other multiple listing? Well, because I was going to get paid for, and it turned out to be a $525,000 sale. So it was well worth it. And I did have to go to Albany 3 times. My buyer was in Texas, did not ever see the home until after they had purchased it. So the stepfather would drive down from Portland and I would drive up from Eugene to view houses in Albany. And their list of what they wanted continued to vary based on how few houses that we had. And so I would meet, his name was Ed, the stepfather. I would meet Ed in either Corvallis or Albany, and we would show or do 3 to 4 houses, and they would do FaceTime with Ed so that they could see these properties. And I have kind of been all over the state this year, but when it's probably not the best way to do business, but I have found it to be a highly successful year. And so when people say, do you want, we're looking to buy a house, like in Portland, they started out saying, well, we think that we want to pay between $400,000 and $500,000 for this house. And what I said to them was, in this fast moving market, I'm not sure I can be the best agent for you, but I tell you what, why don't we just start the search? And they were a situation where we started the search 2 months before I actually showed them a house, because they had Bitcoin money, and Bitcoin has to season in a US bank once they sell it. So they didn't have their funds available. And so I started every Friday, I would just send them houses that were in their criteria. And then when it came time, they said, okay, we're ready now. We had 5 houses to look at on a Saturday. And I said to them early on, if I feel like I can't do you a good job, feel free to fire me. I'm willing to try this, but I just don't know if I can show you houses, if I'll be available enough to be able to get up there to show you a house, because it's going to take me 2 to 3 hours to get up there. And depending on traffic and everything else, it could take longer. So because I had sent them these houses over a period of 2 months, and again, I only sent them houses on Fridays, and I sent them out to go to some open houses on their own because they weren't ready to buy anyway. so I sent them houses that I thought, and I gave them the times and everything that they could go and look at these houses. So when I went up there, we looked at our first house at like 9 o'clock on a Saturday. It just so happened that when they walked into the house, they said, "This is it." And they'd only went as far as the entryway. They had like a small sitting room when you would walk in, and then you walk through the formal dining room and then into the kitchen. And from the kitchen window, the kitchen shared also a family room, and it was a spectacular view. Now, this house was listed at $629,000. And they said, "This is it." And they hadn't looked at any of the bedrooms. They hadn't looked at the rest of the house. They go, "Nope, this is it. We know it." And I said, "Well, we had schedules for a total of 5 houses." I said, "Well, we have 4 other houses that we have committed to looking at. And for me, they'd only looked at a couple other houses on their own. So I said, for me as your buyer's agent, we have to keep our commitment, because I told these other agents that I would. And these, the homeowners are setting aside time to be gone for their homes for us to look at them. So I also, lastly, want you to know that if this is the house for you, that you know that you have looked at what else is out there on the market, and that you have, because this is a lot of money. And it was a younger couple, and they did have a home, but they were going from an 800 square foot home to a 4,000 square foot home. So this was a big deal. And so we looked at those houses. And even though I was an agent here in Eugene, we did end up buying that house, the first one that they looked at, with me. And I had to go back up there for the home inspection. I went up there because we wanted the roof inspected, and then I went there for the closing. So I made 4 trips to get paid for a house that they ended up paying $662,000 for the house. So when you put it all into perspective, was it worth it to take a buyer client that was out of Eugene? And I say yes. And you know what happened? I ended up getting their house. I sold their house that they had several months later. And they were the ones that referred me to that buyer that bought the $525,000 home in Albany. So sometimes saying yes to something that maybe on the surface look as though it may be difficult and out of your comfort zone. I didn't know anything about the market in Portland, but all you have to do is show homes, and you will learn as your buyers learn what is a good property for them and what the market is. Because over that 2-month period before we actually looked at homes together, they were getting a good sense at the houses, and I also at their value. And once those houses sold, I followed those houses. I put them on my watch list, and every time one of them closed, so that we knew what this final sale price was, I would send them that information. So you're going to find that this class is a little bit about, I can't help myself getting off target, but I hope that you're finding this information useful. And if you don't, tell me and I'll stick to the script. So on here, and this is on page 14, it says, keep your buyer focused on the top 5 to 7 houses that you've selected for them to view based on their needs. And they have a script for you to use. And again, I'm not a particularly, I'm not real assertive about pushing them towards one house or another. And you know, some of these scripts for me personally, you know, sometimes they can be too assertive for me. And so I don't like to do that. And I think, again, you'll find your own way. I think scripts are wonderful, but you do have to adapt them so that when they're coming out of your mouth, that you own it and you feel good about it. And just know that you can always change up your scripts, and you can always get better at them. And somebody mentioned that they were on a Ben Kenny Zoom, and Ben Kenny is wonderful. And I've learned a lot from those Ben Kennys, but they're really script oriented. So, but I also think they do a really good job. Okay, so it says qualify homes that you find online. And the day before, like when I line up homes, and let's use this Portland one as an example. I have a spreadsheet, and if you want to write down my contact information, I'll give it to you now. My email address is Linda It's LINDA .reed, REED, at kw.com. And my cell phone number is 541-953-3011. If you want my spreadsheet that I use, just send me an email and I will forward you an Excel spreadsheet that I do. I have done this for every client that I have. When I have a day where I'm going out and I am showing these houses, I make up this Excel spreadsheet with the address. If it's, let's just say that it's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, I write that down. I write down 1 or 2 bathrooms. I write down the asking price. I write down the days on the market. And these are all columns that I have on my Excel spreadsheet. Days on market. I do that because some of them, for example, that house that we looked at in Portland, where the buyer said this is the house when they just had walked through 3 rooms, that had been on the market for 3 weeks. And it was listed at $629 to begin with. But the day that we looked at it, I booked the showing on a Thursday for Saturday. And by Saturday, after 3 weeks, they got an offer. So when I went, I called the agent right away. And this is the key. It's really, when you have a buyer that is extremely interested in a property, become that seller's agent's best friend. Ask plenty of questions. Let that seller's agent know that you are extremely interested in this home. And you don't have to go overboard. Just say, I have a very interested buyer. We're going to send you an offer. How many offers do you have on the table? And the next thing is, if they haven't already pre-posted it on the MLS, find out when when the last time is to have, like, say 3 o'clock or 5 o'clock, whatever time that you have to have your offer submitted. And know that if it's in a multiple offer situation, one of the ways that you're going to get your offer accepted is by having contact with that agent, listing agent. And if they are getting tons of calls, they may not be the easiest to get a hold of. And particularly if they have more than one listing going, it can be problematic to get to them. But for the most part, I would say 80 to 90% of the time, I have really good luck of getting responses back. I prefer to call them and I get a better sense. And sometimes they'll volunteer more information than they would if you just sent them a text. So find your own way on what you work best with that. But prior to doing real estate, when I was a wholesale lumber broker, all of my business was done on the phone. And so I have a bias towards personal contact on the phone. I just think that it works so much better. And trust me, I text a lot with the agents, but I like to have that at least at some point in time connecting verbally over the phone with these sellers agents. So the other reason that I do this Excel spreadsheet is that it is very difficult for the clients to remember all the details about a particular property when you've shown them 5 or 6. One time, the most expensive house that I sold, I represented the buyer in Portland, and this was 2 years ago. And that house, we went into contract at $1.3 million. And we looked at 15 houses over 2 days. And I actually showed that house the day after Christmas. So if people say to you, well, nobody buys houses during the holidays, it's not true. And in this particular case, she had her daughters from out of town. She had 3 daughters. And so she wanted the daughters to look at some of the houses with her. And as it turned out, we couldn't get into the house when she wanted, which was a few days before Christmas. And so we ended up the day after Christmas, and only one of the daughters was able to go through the process with us. But when you've looked at 15 houses in a 2-day period of time, it's very hard to remember the houses entirely. So I encourage them, and I leave space on my Excel spreadsheet for not only me to write notes about the house, but for them to write notes. So when I leave that house, and at that particular time, we were traveling in the same car, but I make notes myself about that property. The other thing that I do when I go out and show these properties, I print off a client full sheet for my buyers every time. And then I have my agent full sheet every time. And I give them a clipboard. And if it's a husband and wife, I give one of them the clipboard with the Excel spreadsheet, and I give the other one the clipboard with the houses that the client full reports. And so they can either write on the client full or they can write on the Excel spreadsheet. But in terms of how I showed those houses in Portland for that property that we went into contract for at $662,000, when they knew that that first house was a house that they wanted to see, I was showing properties that day in Gresham, Happy Valley, and Milwaukee. Well, because I wasn't familiar with the area, I had to MapQuest it, and I couldn't always get the scheduling time because they were using Showing app. So I couldn't always get into the houses when I wanted to. So I had to zigzag between those three towns. Well, what happened is that the next houses that we looked at, they could get in and out of those houses in less than 10 minutes because it was clear that most of them were, it wasn't going to be a property they wanted to buy. And but it gave them really good feel for what the property that they were buying and what they were going to have to do to be able to buy it. So but by having all of that information available, even in hard copy for me, I was able, I didn't go back into the Showing app and send them another request asking for a different time. I just called the agents. And so I said, look, we're running ahead of schedule. It'll only take us 10 minutes or less to pop into this house. Do you have any clue as to, you know, if the other buyers or agent has been in and out of the house? And so I was able to get those agents on those other 5 houses that we had to look at. I was able to condense that so that we looked at a total of 6 houses in 2 hours in 3 cities. So part of that is just being prepared and being willing just to do something that asking an agent to help you out. And so it worked out fine, but you just have to be adaptable and in some cases be assertive for your buyer. And because they already knew that I had that one offer on the table. And so the minute that we had looked at the house, I called that selling agent and said, we're going to be writing an offer, but I have to get back to Eugene in order to do that. So I say all of this just to say that go prepared with data, and I'm old school, so I did my data mostly by having the agent full reports for myself so that I had the same Excel spreadsheet and that I also had the details so that I could just easily sit in my car and call up that agent and say, hey, can we get into this next house? So then let's see what else that they suggest. Any questions before I move on?
Linda, I have a question.
Go ahead.
So when you call the listing agent asking how many offers do you have on the table, we think we're gonna make an offer on this house, what other questions would you recommend to ask that will help your buyer to win? What other questions can we ask?
Yeah, that's a great question. And what I say to the agent is, what is it that your seller is looking for? What's your seller looking for? Do they want a quick close? Do they want to stay after, you know, time to move out of the house? An example is the house in Albany. They, in the multiple listing, they said that they wanted 2 or 3 days after the close to be able to move to their next house. So because my buyers, they were out of town and they weren't moving in until December, it gave up nothing for us to give them extra time. So when we wrote the offer, we wrote it for the buyers to be able to stay in an additional 10 days for free, because the sellers, it didn't matter. They were going to be paying for that house whether they were living in it or not. And the second thing was, in this particular case, this was a cash buyer. So I I wrote the offer for us to close a week before those sellers needed their money. So they didn't have to worry about getting the funds released to them the same day that they wanted to get into their new home. It's very important to ask that listing agent, what is it that the seller is looking for?
Right, thank you.
Yeah, so yeah, really important. That is part of the success in getting your buyer's offer accepted, is being able to give that seller what they want.
Thanks.
Anybody else have a question?
Yes, I do have a question. So what if the seller just want more money, but your buyer couldn't offer more? So what would you do?
Well, if they can't offer more, then they're probably out of the game in that particular house. Because if it's just more money, and that's a prime example of what happened on one of the 2 listings that I had last week. And so when buyer's agents would ask me, what does your client want? I said, well, my client is 93 years old. And what she wants is she doesn't have to do repairs, and she wants the most amount of money that she can get out of this house, because this is the amount of money that she's going to, what she's going to have to live for the rest of her life. And medical expenses being what they are, it can be quite expensive. So she wanted the most money, and it came down to exactly that. And so I ended up, I had 9 offers, and at the last minute when the agents would call me, and this is the interesting thing, and it's called shopping the buyer when you're a listing agent. A lot of agents will not use this. It is not illegal. And if you want the information from OAR, I attained this when I took the accredited buyers class. It's actually taught in a different class. It's a pricing strategy class, I believe. But anyway, the instructor was nice enough to give us this information. But as long as you, as a listing agent, have permission from the seller to be able to reveal the offers that you have, you can say to those buyers agents what you have. And here's how I handled it. I got the first offer came in at $24,000 less than asking. It was a total as is, but it was cash. So the next time that an agent called, they said, we're going to be submitting an offer. What do you have? Now remember, I'm talking as a listing agent. I said, I have 1 offer on the table, as is, less than asking. So that told them that if they made at least an asking price, then they were going to be in the running. So the next price the next offer that came in about 3 hours later was $6,000 over asking. It was also a cash offer, and it was an as is. And in that particular property, we had a $4,000 foundation fix that the seller had agreed to pay. But these offers, these cash offers, when they came through, they said, you don't have to fix the foundation. It's fine. We'll take care of it ourselves. And that's in a aggressive market like we have. That's what buyers will do to get their offer accepted. Well, for my seller, it was a good deal because that was $4,000 more that she had in her pocket if she didn't have to repair that foundation. So that offer came in $6,000 over the asking price. So then when the next agent called me and said, I'm going to write an offer. What is it that your seller wants, and how many offers do you have? Well, it doesn't matter how many offers that you have at that point. You need data. I mean, I could have said, well, I have 6 offers, but it doesn't really tell you much. It just tells you that, I mean, you don't know what those offers are. And just bear in mind that not all offers are good offers. That first offer that was $24,000 was not a good offer, but you had an offer, and then you always had something to work off. So the first offer sometimes is really important. It's just how you get to the next step when you're the listing agent and you're negotiating a sales price. So that So the second agent, when they came in with a $6,000 over asking price, then when the next agents called and said, how many offers do you have? Again, I just switched up my script and I said, I have an over asking offer and it is as is. So no offer thereafter came in. They all just increased. I didn't have to tell them that my offer was $305. My listing price was $299. I didn't say to those early people what the sales price was. I had permission to do it. I just didn't. I didn't feel the need to tell them what that price was. So as the day developed, every offer that came in was for more money. And then when I got to the end, it was the difference between, I had one agent that says, hey, if I'm close, let me know. And I may have some wiggle room. So when it came down to the very end, I was down to the last hour and I had to go meet this seller and I had potentially 3 more offers that were coming in and I hadn't seen them yet. And so I called each one of those agents and did not get them to pick up right away. And so I thought to myself, well, I have 6 really good offers. So 5 really good offers. And so I'm just gonna, if they can't pick up and call me back or text me right away that they're still sending it, I still had to get over to that house to meet the seller. And she had 2 family members that one had come down from Portland. So I didn't have any wiggle room for the time when we were going to review the offers. So the one agent that said to me, come back to me if I'm close. So I did. And I came back and I said, my best offer is $326. And it was a cash offer, totally as is. And I said, I think if you come in at $330, I can get your offer accepted if it's totally as is, comparing apples to oranges. And so they sent an addendum changing their price. And I went and presented all of the offers and they took that highest offer that I had. They had to wait 5 additional days to get $4 more thousand on cash versus conventional. So it's, once you get through a listing or 2, or even a buying experience or 2, with each one of them, you will learn a little bit. The first buyer that I represented, I looked at the house, I drove by it within a few hours of it having been listed, and there was a waiting line of people to get into it. And it was 2 sisters that were buying it for their parents. And one of the sisters had to drive down from Vancouver. So the very next day, I said, you got to get down here so that we can look at this house. And we did. That was on a Saturday, and they were going to review the offers on Sunday afternoon. So we looked at one other house, and then the one daughter had to get back to Vancouver. And so I didn't hear from them. And Sunday morning, they called me, and it was 8:30 according to my clock, but I had forgotten that it was daylight savings time. And so it was really 9:30. So one of the daughters calls and she said, we want to make an offer on the house. And I had never written my own contract or offer. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, this is not good. And so, I mean, it was good, but it wasn't good. And so Mara was my coach at the time. And so she helped walk me through that. And having a coach to me in the beginning was, I thought it was, investment wise, it was the best thing that I did for my business because I never looked stupid. I had her, and I would always just say, well, let me check that out. I don't have that information with me but I can get that for you. And so she was always extremely responsive. And so having a coach was key. So we wrote an escalation clause on that house. And we, I forget what it was that they wanted. but anyway, we wrote an escalation clause to, in that case, the house sold for, I think around 260,000. And so we said that we would pay $1,000 more than their best offer to get the house. And so we were successful in doing that. In today's market, if I write an escalation clause, I never write it for anything less than $2,000 because it's, you know, and it's ridiculous to think that you could write, oh, well, I'll pay $500 over your best offer. And as a listing agent, I can tell you that there are agents that do that, and it is just a dumb move. It's insulting to think that you're for $500 that a seller is going to choose your offer over somebody else's that is, you know, all things being equal, that there's an advantage to them. It's just not enough money. So, but anyway, I wrote the escalation clause and we were successful. And again, it got down to asking the seller's agent how many offers they had and what their sellers were looking for. And I talked to that agent probably 4 or 5 times because as the afternoon was going on and she was getting close to her deadline, and I found out that we had like, you know, 5 different people or 6 different people, or I can't even remember now what the number was. And that was 4 years ago, but it was in that price point that there were a lot of buyers. So, and it was a cute little house and it was fixed up nice and all of that. So anyway. So I hope that answers your question. If not, ask me for more detail.
Oh, yes. Sorry, I want to learn about the risk of adding the escalation clause in the offer. Because what if the seller receives an extremely high offer, and with the escalation clause, your buyer will have to add a couple $1,000 on top of that unreasonably high price. Could
Well,
the buyer afford that?
Well, you set a top amount of money that your escalation clause only goes, say for example, you have a house at 250. And so you write the offer that you will pay up to 260. And what I would do in that case is I would say that you would pay up to 262 because you're going to pay, if somebody else wrote an offer at 260, the only way you're going to get it is if you've written it at 262, so the 2,000 over a 10,000. So in essence, your buyer is going to be paying 12,000 more than what the list price was. But you set that number. You set that in your escalation clause, what the maximum amount of money is that your buyer will pay.
Thank you.
Now, one of the things that I did in that Portland property that was listed at 629, and then they got it after having been on the market for 3 weeks, and this was in like March of this year, March or April. They by the day that they were going to review the offers, a second offer came in. So here's how I handled this particular one. The list price was 629, and I said to the buyers, I am almost 100% certain that that agent will have written that first offer because there were no other offers on the table. And if that buyer's agent didn't have constant contact with the listing agent, she or he wouldn't know how many offers were on the table. So I said, you wouldn't offer more money than what they were asking if it had been on the market for 3 weeks and there were no other offers on the table at the time they submitted theirs. Well, they submitted theirs a couple of days before I showed the property. So I said, I'm pretty sure that they just wrote it for the 629. So we went in at 650. So that was our base price, not the 629. So we paid them 20,000 over their asking price right there from the beginning. Then we wrote an escalation clause to pay as much as 670. Well, when when that second offer came in, I called up those buyers and they needed this particular house. There wasn't another one out there that was like this because they needed a house that would have multi-family generational housing. The father-in-law was going to be living with them, and this particular house had 900 square feet at the basement level, and it had a complete kitchen, it had a complete laundry area, and a complete bathroom, as well as 2 bedrooms on that basement level floor. And it actually wasn't a basement; it was ground level. The house was built against a hill, so. On a per square footage price, when you compared the the per square footage, it was like they got at least a third of that house for free. It was that crazy because the price per square footage was only 163,000 because it was almost 4,000 square feet. So. But when that second offer came in, I said, I don't want to take any chances. And that's what they had said to me. We need this house. We want this one. This is it. So we sent an addendum. We raised our top price to $690. Well, the next price, that second offer that came in at $660. So they wouldn't have known about our, well, they had no idea of knowing that we had given a base price of $650. And that first buyer, either that $629 was the most they could pay, or they never checked back with that listing agent. So they didn't know how many offers were in. So the second price came in at $660 and we bought it at $662 because we would have gone up as much as $690, but it wasn't necessary. So it can be a complicated process, and it depends on how much money that your buyers have, how bad they want the house. And it's really kind of a matter of, do they have the money? Another interesting thing was in that Albany property where my buyers did not see the house and they were not moving until December, January. We wrote an offer. That house was listed at $475 and we were paying cash, and we gave them, so we wrote it for $50,000 over, and we were not the top price, but we had the best terms, and that was giving them 10 days after closing to move in and giving them their money a week early. So the terms that we gave them were the most attractive. I still don't know what the top number was, but it's all in those details. That's how you get your offers accepted. But you sometimes, and this is the frustrating part for us buyers agents, is when our buyers don't have the amount of money to go higher than, I mean, it's really difficult to find a house today that is going to sell at the list price. It does happen, but it just doesn't always happen. And so that's what, it can make it hard for us. Hard for the buyers too, when they just can't get their offers accepted. But. So does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. It's all a negotiation. Every step that you go along, you're just negotiating something that, and every deal is different. But the more that you have of the experience of having one under your belt and then the next one under your belt, then it becomes easier. And just reach out to another agent too and ask them how to do it. Tell them your circumstance and just kind of brainstorm over it. Okay, and in Eugene, the agents, some of them use that showing time app and some of them don't. The last 2 listings that I had put in there for the people to call or text me, and 95% of them did just that. There were a few that used the showing time app, but I just prefer to chat with the people and that sort of thing. But Portland, they use showing time religiously, and so did Albany. So it's kind of interesting. Okay, so let me look here and see what time it is, 2:50 or 2:18, okay. So reduce the list of matching properties, okay. Well, let's see. It looks like they want us to break down into partners. Do they ever do that on these Zoom calls with you? I would think it'd be difficult to do. So I'm assuming the answer is no. Okay, so let's see this. Okay, so some of the objectives of this is kind of interesting because it says reduce the number of matching properties for your buyer down to 15 and then the final 5. I mean, we'd be lucky if we could have 15 in this market. The other thing that I find too, in sometimes, particularly if I have the time to spare, sometimes I say to the buyers when you're first starting out, I'll say, let's just take the 5 best houses that we find on this list. And and if we get lucky this first time out, great. But if we don't, let's not be frustrated because we didn't find it, because it's kind of an adventure for both you and me. And we're both going to discover what you like best about these properties, what you like about the neighborhoods. And if we can get lucky on the first time out, that would be super. And so sometimes I try to set expectations for these buyers, and particularly this kind of market it's so competitive that you don't want to discourage them either by giving them too much negative feedback. So I try to keep it as positive as I can, but also say to them, you know, just know that we still have active multiple buyers on most listings, not all, but most. And a good example is that Harrisburg property that I just had last week. It was new everything. And we had one offer that on the second day that came through and it was over asking, but by the next day they got cold feet, withdrew the offer, and that listed on Monday, and we didn't get our second offer until Friday. And so they did the same thing that the first buyer had done, and they submitted an offer at 5,000 over asking. And they did that so that I wouldn't hold an open house on Saturday and Sunday. And I said, sure, we'll take that. And so we went into contract. So that, and this was a case where this particular buyer, they said they've tried to buy other houses and they don't want to get into a bidding war. Well, it just so happened that there was no bidding war on that property, and it was a darling property. So they were happy. So you just kind of set expectations, and sometimes you just get lucky. So, so this is showing homes, prepare to show the homes, look at the showing instructions on the multiple listing. That is extremely important to do that before you go out in these properties. So pay really good attention to what those private notes say to use. And you can put those kind of things on when you go, because these days we're going in separate cars. When I started even 4 years ago, we were putting the buyers in our car, but I don't foresee that happening again. And I like the idea that you're not in the car with these people for the entire time that you're showing houses. It gives you time sometimes to make a quick call to one of the agents. It gives you time to collect your thoughts. You're thinking about the next property. You're making notes about the one you just saw. It gives them a chance to have comments and dialogue, but amongst themselves without you being present. I just think that it's far better to be in separate cars. But so it says, always call the listing agent to see if the home is available and if there have been any offers. And I like to do that when I'm setting that appointment. I think that that's really important. And now you'll notice on some of those private notes that the agents will write that the buyer the buyer reserves the right to accept an offer beforehand. And what I do and I have written that, but most of the time I'm one of those that sets a deadline of when I'm going to review offers. And if you happen to reach that deadline and you don't have any offers, you just go back in and edit your listing and just take that out of when you're going to review offers. But I've had some agents that call and say, will you promise me that you won't pull this beforehand? And most of the time, the agents will write an offer according to what you've asked. So if you're reviewing offers, let's just say you're reviewing Monday nights at 5 o'clock. Most of the agents will write it to expire by 8 p.m. that night. So it gives you time to be able to review the offers and then get back to them. Once in a while, and I have done this because I want a quick answer. Sometimes I've only given the agents 12 hours. I'll ask them if their sellers are available to make a quick response to an offer. And so sometimes I've written it and only given them like 12 hours because I want an answer and I want it now. So why wait? But if the agent has said that they're reviewing on a certain time, then I honor that. And I have had other agents that call me and say, do you promise that you won't pull this before the deadline that you have listed? And if I have promised them to do that, then I stick to that. If I don't have any offers on the table, however, and I have an offer that is expiring before that deadline and I have no other offers, then I do pull it. But if I have other offers on the table, I do not pull it early. So it says set the home tour date with your buyer with specific time and end time. Give 24-hour notice if possible. Check with the buyer to make sure that they have their earnest money ready if necessary. That is just all stuff that you can do before you've ever shown a house, so you don't need to do it with each house that you sell. The one thing that I will say is, and I don't know if you've seen the 10 Commandments list. That's something else. If you want a copy of that, I can send it to you. But one of the things on that is that the 10 Commandments for people that are getting ready to buy a house. And one of them is don't make any new purchases like a new car, because that affects their credit scores. And so that is something that I make sure that I share with my buyers, and I go over that whole list in my consultation about what the kind of the do's and don'ts before you don't apply for a new credit card, because again, that affects your credit score. So I have those kind of conversations with my buyers. I do not always have a sit-down buyer consultation with my buyers. I would say at least 50% of the time I do not. I do it over the phone. I make my notes and I don't have them sit down and fill out the lengthy forms about what they want and don't want. And I kind of just like cut to the chase. What is it that you want? Let's see what's out there. Let's go on this adventure. Let's look at a few houses, and then you can tell me what you like or don't like about the process, the houses that I've selected, your do's and what you want and don't want. And sometimes in order to get an offer accepted, they have to accept a house that they might have to do a little bit of remodel work to it, like new countertops or paint or whatever, to make it more pleasing to them. But sometimes they don't always get the house that they want. Preview houses and eliminate any that don't meet their criteria. And again, I don't stick, I stick to the criteria when it's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath. That generally, they're not going to look at a house with a 3-bedroom, 1-bath. When they need the 2 bathrooms, they need the 2 bathrooms. And the other thing that I try to keep in mind for my buyers is I always try to keep in mind the potential that they're going to sell this house someday. And having a house that has 2 bathrooms is a much easier house to sell than one that only has 1 bathroom. And I talk to them about that too, about resale value. Let's see, prepare and educate yourself about the home and demographics. And I think that that's probably important to do about the demographics. Frankly, it's not something that I've done in 4 years' time. I don't get asked much about the demographics in Eugene. So, and even when I was selling in Portland or representing the buyers, they knew it better than I did. So they didn't ask any questions like that. Determine which route to take. And I don't do that. Everybody has GPS. I'll see you there. Arrange to meet with your buyer at your office or in front of the first home that you'll be touring. And of course, that's, some of this I need to update. We just meet at the first house. And I give them that list of the houses in order that we're going to be seeing that day. Sometimes I email it to them in advance, but for sure it's on that list when I give them the spreadsheet, and I put that spreadsheet in the order in which we're going to view houses. But sometimes I put them, if we're going to view a lot, I put it on a separate sheet, so it's easier to follow. And it works out really well too if you have one person that's kind of navigating and the other one that's driving. So it says print out the MLS information, which I already talked about, and make a copy of the 5 must-haves, have it fill out that. So anyway, those are pretty easy, and you'll figure out what kind of if you're only working with one buyer at a time, it's pretty easy to know what they want. Some of this is kind of good information. Let's see, let's go down here and change this slide, see if this is. It says ring the doorbell, even if the home has a lockbox. So oftentimes they'll say to announce yourself, hello, real estate agent, and pause, or just say, hello, is anybody here? Something like that. Most of the time I don't do that, but I don't think it's a bad idea. I just haven't had any bad experiences that way. And this says, have your buyers give descriptive names to the houses that they've seen. It says they're talking about to help them visualize the homes. But again, when I give them a paper copy, then, plus that client full, it's pretty easy for them to remember which house that they looked at, but it's important for them to take the notes on those papers. When you're showing the house, it says to help the buyers identify the perfect house by pointing out the benefits. I kind of let the buyers, I let them enter the house in front of me first, so they go in first, and I let them get that first impression. And then if I don't think it's a suitable house for them, I just let them find their own way. I don't offer a lot of feedback unless I see something that's a red flag. Then I'll point those things out. And sometimes they'll ask me what I think about a property. And if I really like a property, then I tell them that I think this is a great property for them. But I try not to offer a whole lot of input. I don't follow them around to every room. I look at the house myself as well. So they may go into one area, and then I kind of keep my ears open to if I can hear what they're saying, so that if I know that I should make myself available to answer a question for them. But I kind of peruse through the house too, so that I have, so that I can look at it with my realtor eye versus them as a home buyer. And it says here to finally ask your buyer if they can envision seeing themselves living there, and follow up why not, or ask them if they're ready to make an offer. I do not do that. I don't ask them if they're ready to make an offer. They tell me, and I feel like I don't want to put the pressure on them. And, I've had a career of sales. So because 30 years being in the wholesale lumber business, buying and selling, that was 100% sales. And those buyers know, they know when they're ready to pull the trigger. Sometimes you have to offer them things that will lead them to make a decision. So you might say something like, if you're interested in this house, I don't expect it to last long. So consider that. If we need to, at the end of this day, if we need to write an offer, then you let me know. But I don't let them, I don't leave them 100% to their own devices either, because that's part of my job, I feel, is to say to them, if this meets your criteria, if you like this house as much as I think that this is a good match for you, then we should be talking about or thinking about writing an offer. And that's kind of how I might phrase it to someone. House touring etiquette. Leave the house as you found it, so make sure to turn off the lights. I always find this interesting. It says, including the AC and the heat. I have never touched an air conditioning unit or a thermometer, a heat register in any house. It's just, you're not in there that long. And if a house is unheated, I guess you look at it faster. but I don't touch those things. But definitely, I like to turn on all the lights in the house if I get there early, like maybe like here in Eugene, we're not very far to anything. So maybe we only have like a house just came on the market, you only have one to show them that night. If the sellers haven't left all the lights on, then I like to get there a few minutes early and turn on the lights for everyone. But then you have to remember to close them. And the other really important thing is to remember to double check to make certain that the buyers have closed the sliding glass doors. If there was any kind of little device in there to lock the door, like a dowel in the tract, make sure that you put that back. If they go in outside, they go open any gates or anything, make sure that those gates are closed. And sometimes in the private notes, there will be notes about pets. 100%. I mean, that's a deal killer if you let the cat out when you're not supposed to. So just make sure that you just do all of those things. It is very easy to forget doing some of those things because you get caught up in the chatter with your buyers. But just remember that you have a responsibility to that seller to lock everything up and turn out the lights. If you go into a house and the lights are already on, leave them on, because that's the way that sellers are supposed to leave them, like when the house is open for tour. But you're going to find that you'll go through vacant houses that they don't leave the lights on all the time. So that's when you'd be turning off the lights. And then make sure that you leave one of your business cards on the counter. And those are really, psychologically, those are really important to the sellers because they see how much the house and how good the agent is at getting buyers in and that sort of thing. But it's really important to those sellers to see that somebody who's been in their house and the volume of people that are looking at it. And then if there's anything wrong, like if you arrived at that house and the front door was unlocked or the back door was unlocked, not a bad idea to, when you're leaving, to call that agent real quick or text them and say, FYI, someone left the back door open. And it does happen. So let's see what our next one is. Benefits and features. Okay, any questions on that previous section about showing the homes? If they have left booties there for you to put on, particularly if it's a rainy day, just make sure that your people put those booties on and everything. And if you're a listing agent and have a listing, one of the things that I would make certain is that there is a chair next to that little basket or wherever those booties are, so that some people need to have something to sit down on to be able to put their booties on. And also to have a I have a printed up sign that I think I ordered it off Etsy that just says, please remove your shoes. And I frame it in a cheap black frame that I just buy at Michael's, the craft shop, Michael's. They're cheap, but I frame those up so that they look nice. And I put those beside the baskets for people to put those on. And sometimes those ones that are kind of a cottony, they're still paper, but some of those get so dirty on the bottom that if I'm the listing agent, I'll go like every day and just check those out. If it's a vacant house, I'll go and check out those booties. And if it's an owner occupied house, then I'll leave some a little package of booties for them to change those out if they get too nasty. So that's just one of those things. So people don't like to put those things on if people have gotten them dirty. And some people, in spite of, no matter how you try to keep an eye on your buyers, sometimes they'll wear those booties outside and then they've worn them back inside. And so you have a mess going on. So if that happens and they ruin the booties, I take them with me. And I just keep a plastic bag in the car and I'll dump them in there, because it has happened multiple times. I can't tell you how many actually. It's kind of goofy how they do that, but anyway. Okay, so benefits. So this is wanting you to break into teams, so we're not going to do that. No. Okay, so and again, when you're leaving those houses, I like to point out to the buyer and have a little session with them of pointing out, and I do this outside the house. I recap what we liked or didn't like about the particular property. Again, I do that outside of the house because there are, I don't know statistically how many, we probably will never know, but I tell every buyer that I take into a house that they are to assume that that house has a camera and a listening device. And I had a property this summer that it was very clear that they had a camera there. They had a camera on the outside of the house and they had a camera on the inside of the house. Every time that a buyer and an agent went through that house, that seller would call me and they would tell me everything that those buyers said. So after the first day of having that property listed, I went in the private notes and I put in there is a camera. Please know that anything that you say inside the house can be heard by the seller. And because it wasn't that it's unfair for these sellers to listen, it was that those buyers agents were just not cognizant and did not coach their clients before they walked in the house. And so I tell them the first house that we look at that day, that we are not to discuss any financial issues about this house or condition issues. If you like the house, it's okay to say, I love this, I like this, but I encourage them not to say anything negative when they're inside the house, because I'm just going to assume that we're being recorded or on camera. And the other thing is that oftentimes, if it's a owner-occupied house, oftentimes if they've been asked to leave, they're just across the street at the neighbor's house and they're watching everything that goes on. So that's another thing. So this, be aware. And
I have a question. Yes. Is it
Go ahead.
legal to record other people's conversation without disclosing first?
Not that I know of, but maybe, but they do it. And in this particular case, they didn't record them, but they could hear them live and it showed up on their phone. The camera was in clear sight in the dining room, but they seemed to pause right there at the bar area, in that kitchen area, and would talk about the house and talk about what they wanted to do and all that. So, yeah. But I haven't heard anything that it's illegal to record them, and they own the house. And so I would kind of doubt it, but I don't know. I'm not a legal expert, but I'm just telling you what my experience has been. It was funny because he complained when some of the agents unplugged the camera. It was hilarious. The only bad part was they forgot to plug it back in. So then that didn't make him happy. He didn't care that they weren't talking in front of him. He just didn't like it that they didn't turn it back on or plug it back in. So, okay. But trust me, your clients will thank you in a situation like that. If they're running that house, they don't know. It doesn't even cross their mind that they're going to be on camera. So, okay, this is on page 22, recognizing buying signals as you tour the home. And I thought that this list was kind of interesting. It says some of the most common buying signals are body language, facial expressions. And I think that that's very true. Asking about the seller's motivations. And that is always interesting to me because I think that that has nothing to do with why they're should not be of concern to a buyer. It just, to me, it's just a crazy question to ask them. And if you know the answer, if the listing agent has happened to mention it or something, it's okay to tell them what you know. But as far as a buyer needing to know that information, I just think it is totally unrelated to them wanting to buy and having success in buying the house. If they're asking detailed questions about the seller's disclosure or taxes, and most of the time I have not given these clients seller disclosures. Once they go into contract, that's when they get them. I see no reason if you have them, because sometimes the agents will load them up on their listing. And Angela, there in the office, Angela Armstrong is my transaction coordinator, and she loads those up on a listing. So any agent can go in and look at it. And particularly if the house looks like if you have listed it as a fixer, then those seller disclosures will have some of the details that are important for the buyers to know. So in that case, I would definitely print off a seller disclosure and at least have it available to discuss, either that or make notes on the property and not have the disclosures in hand with me, but put them on that spreadsheet that I have. So again, this is back to common buying signals that you should look for, visualizing their furniture placement. And I think that oftentimes is a good clue. And sometimes they just kind of go through the scenario and it's meaningless. So it just kind of depends on the client. Comparing other houses to it, discussing new paint or carpet. I find that they will do that regardless of whether they're really interested in buying the house. They just make comments about condition, whether they're really interested or not. Sitting down in the house. I find that buyers don't do that. I've had a few that if there wasn't another booking that was coming up right after, this particular year, I have had no one that's done it, just because we didn't have the time or the luxury of time to do it when we were just booked on a 15-minute interval to look at the house. If they are being protective, not wanting other buyers to see the property, if they ask for a second showing, and the market has been such that right now it's very difficult to have the time or opportunity to get in for a second showing. But it is a good sign. And raising objections. And the notes in here says you may be surprised by number 10, raising objections. It's a common misconception that objections such as I don't like the carpet means that the buyer isn't interested in the property. And that it just may be that these are strong buying signals, and it doesn't mean that they are not interested. It also may mean that they want to ask for a carpeting allowance or something like that, which if there are multiple offers, they probably wouldn't get a carpeting allowance on the property. So it looks like there you have some scripts on page 23, and I think it's really good to read through these scripts. And when I would do scripts, if I was just reading it for myself, I always read them aloud. Because it was a way, reading without reading it aloud somehow it just never gelled with me, and I couldn't recall it to be able to use it in my own language. But by reading them out loud and doing them several times, I really found that I could remember them pretty well. And the same was with attending Ignite classes. When somebody gave an example or something, I could pull that out. I could remember it. It was that hands-on kind of information that I just loved. And so that's one of the things that I like about all the trainings, is that these little tidbits just make you feel more powerful as an agent, and knowledge is power, and it builds your confidence. So, all right, so page 24 is bringing your buyers to a decision. And I don't know, they didn't show me how to do the videos. Let me see if, it says create buyer. Okay, there's a little vid, it says stop video. I hesitate to start any of this. I don't know. Well, I don't know. I hesitate to do that. Don't hold it against me. Okay, so number 3, bring your buyers to decision. It says, remember, you are not a tour guide with a lockbox key. Your job, once you have helped them find the right house, is to facilitate the decision-making process for your buyers so they can make an offer and get the home they want before someone else does. This is an important milestone in the home buying process. Sometimes what I do is after I've looked at these houses, let's just say that we looked at 4 or 5 houses. Then I'll say, let's go for coffee or let's go for a glass of wine and let's talk about our day so that I can get kind of a better feel for what you liked, what you didn't like. And then if there's something that you want to make an offer on, we can talk about that too. So, so if you have time and if they're willing, I think a debrief is really good. And you may just do the debrief outside the house. You may not have any more time. They may not have any more time. So you have to be really good at just being able to know how to ask the questions. Is there anything that we looked at today that, and most of the time they will tell you, well, I really like this house. And again, I would just encourage you to, when you step outside of each one of the houses, you can just say, is this a yay or a nay or a possibility? And then you can move to the next question. And that may be, so what is it about this house? Maybe you think it was a good house for them, but they've given you a nay. Then I would ask them, so what is it about this house that didn't work for you? Or on the other hand, were there some positive things about this house, but there was just a couple of things that you really didn't like? And find out. It's kind of you kind of become an investigator. Okay, making the decision-making process. Okay, each time ask your buyer to rank that property on a scale of 1 to 10. That's not a bad idea. I've never done it, but not a bad idea. I'm more cut to the chase. While I'm not a particularly, I think that I take a soft approach with buyers for the most part, but after we've looked at a number of houses and I get a real good feel, then I'm pretty, most of the time they will self-select and I don't have to say, okay, it's, you know, if you really want this one, we need to make a decision. That's what I'll do. Those are something like that. I'll say to them. So I don't feel like it's pressuring them. If they say no, they say no. You know, it's not my money. So I always keep that in mind. And I say to my buyers, I'm going to look at this as if I'm spending my own money and I'm doing this from your shoes. And so I try real hard to put myself in my buyer's shoes. And we all can't buy $500,000 or $600,000 houses. So I try to keep every buyer, I try to respect where they're at and where their financial situation is, and to help them buy the best house for them. And I've had people that have looked at houses and said, let me give you an example. I'd shown this lady a number of houses. She was 74 years old. And we started off looking at $600,000 houses. And I even went down as low as showing her, by her request, a $200,000 manufactured home in a mobile home park. So she was all over the board. But she fell in love with a mid-century modern house in South Eugene. And it definitely was dated, but it had some nice features for a mid-century modern house. You walked in, the living room had a vaulted ceiling. It had an attractive fireplace that the rock formation of the fireplace went all the way to it probably had 14-foot ceilings. They were really tall. But the house was in South Eugene. You have a lot of hill property. So you drove into the driveway and it had like 10 or 15 steps to get up to the main level. Then once you were on the main level, to get up to the bedrooms, you had another, 6 or 8 steps to get up to the bedroom area. Then if you wanted to go to the outside deck, that was on an upper level because it was built into a hill. So there were really 4 levels that you had to get up. You had to go from stairs to get in from your car to the upper level. So at age 74 for my buyer, she really wanted to make an offer on the house and it was getting lots of showings. And she says, I really want this house. And I said, I don't think this is the house for you. And this is why I say this. At 74, we don't know what life is going to bring us in the way of our health. And she was in real good health. But I said, look, you could have a stroke tomorrow, or you could have to have knee replacement surgery or hip replacement surgery. How are you going to get into your house? I mean, you can't get out of your car and get even into your first level of this home. You're not going to sleep in your garage. So what are you going to do? And so when I pointed out what I considered, it wasn't that and she didn't really want a house that she had to update. And this house needed a lot of updating. But it did have charm, if you liked a mid-century modern. But she came back to that house later, before it had gone into contract, and we did not look at it. And she says, I really like that house. And I said, well, and it didn't require me trying to talk her out of it. She goes, I know it's not right for me. I know that I have to think about my health, and it's hard. And it is hard for older buyers to sometimes come to grips with they're not going to be healthy always. And at that age, you just don't know what's going to happen. So I felt like I didn't feel like I was going out on a limb to say to her, I don't think this is the right house for you. And if she would have wanted to write a contract on it, I would have written the contract, because that wasn't my decision at that point. I gave her what I thought was a negative for her. And in my mind, it was a huge negative. But if she said, I want to make an offer, I would have written the offer, because I worked for her. And she didn't buy it. And the interesting thing about that particular buyer, she has ghosted me more times, and she'll come back after several months and she'll want to look at houses again. And I don't know if she'll ever buy anything, but she was a project, to say the least. Okay, now we're on page 25. So got the right slide. So it says, after each showing, ask if they want to purchase that house. And again, I don't ask that question at every house. They will tell me, but I make sure that at the end, like if I've looked at several houses, then I ask them if there are any houses that day that they wanted to make an offer on. I do that. Most of the time, I don't even have to get that far. They will tell me. So it's some of this, you find that you don't have to do it. And so it says, when you finish touring homes, put all your MLS sheets together in their order of ranking, eliminate all but the top 2 ranking houses. And you can do that from that spreadsheet that I have as well. And sometimes it takes more than 1 day of going out and looking at houses. This summer, this year, I have been really lucky. I haven't had to show very many houses to get the sales done. In terms of the Albany property, I did go up 3 different times, and sometimes it was only 2 or 3 houses that we were looking at. We probably looked at less than 10 houses for them to buy that one house at 5 1/4. So, and it was an easy, it was a 1 hour trip to get up there, and we'd spend half an hour looking at houses or so, or maybe an hour, and come back. But when they saw the right house, the stepfather was all in on it. And let me tell you a funny story about how that one happened. Real estate is really a crazy business. It's very fun, but there's always just weird stuff that happens. So I had booked the appointment to look at this house on the Showing Time app. And for some reason, either the agent didn't confirm it and I didn't notice because we had a number of houses that day, or there was a glitch in the app, and I still don't know what really happened. But we get there, we had a 2 o'clock appointment, and I get there, and I'm getting ready to unlock the door, and another agent shows up, and she pulls into the driveway. And I said, are you here for a showing at 2? Because that's when I thought that I had the appointment. And she said, yes. I said, are your clients here yet? And she said, no, they're coming in a separate car. And I said, look, I don't know what happened, but I have a 2 o'clock appointment also. I said, tell you what, because my buyer's representative was there. So I said, we'll be quick, but so if you let us in, and I already had unlocked the door, I just hadn't gotten in. And I said, just knock on the door or come on in. I'm not opposed to you showing your clients at the same time that I'm showing. I mean, we used to do it with broker tour all the time or open houses. So to me, it was kind of foolish. I mean, it's not like it was going to be a big deal. But we were in that house literally for less than 5 minutes. But because the buyers had looked at multiple houses online, and they had looked at that house online, and they were pretty happy with what they saw. We were in there less than 5 minutes and showing them this house, and then that other agent is ringing the doorbell and wanted us out. So so we walked outside and with the client still on the FaceTime. And so I said to them, you know, you're not going to get this house for anything less than 50,000 over the asking price on it. And I felt bad because we couldn't leisurely look at that house for them, but it was hands down. It was the 3rd time that we'd looked at houses, and it was hands down the best house of all of them. And it was a single level house. And that's what they wanted. They started out wanting to buy with single level, but before they went and had dinner with some friends that also had young children. And this particular buyer has a 4-year-old, and they were expecting another child. So she is still pregnant. So they decided that they wanted, in the beginning, that they only wanted to have a single level house so that they could keep more track of the babies and everything. But when they'd gone and had dinner with some friends that had a 2-story house, and in the middle of this home buying process, they changed their mind, decided that they would look at 2-story. Well, it's easier to find 2-story houses in their price point and everything. But when this one was a single story level, really nice neighborhood, beautifully laid out house, and she's going to go to vet school at Oregon State. So it had a separate office. So it not only had the 3 bedrooms, but it had a separate office for her to be able to study and have some quiet space for her to study for school and everything. So it was by far just the perfect house. And right then and there, they said, hey, we're good with making the offer. Let's do it. And so, but literally they only had like a 5-minute viewing of that house and made a $525,000 purchase. So that's what I mean, that real estate can be crazy. Let's see. Okay, so they're just telling you to do these pros and cons, but and to ask them if they want to go ahead and make an offer. But like I said, most of the time the people tell me I don't have to prompt them to do that. I wish I knew how to do this video thing, but oh well, they should have told me how to do it before they asked me, right? I'll claim ignorance. Okay, what no offers? If your buyers don't want to make an offer in any property that show, make sure you understand why. And you know, I mean, some of this is sort of counterintuitive, because once you've looked at the houses, and you'll have conversations with them outside the door, and you can just go, yeah, well, I didn't like this, and sometimes they may not have liked it, but then they go out and they look at some other houses on another day with you, and then they go, you know what, that one house wasn't so bad after all. So some of those that they say no on, I don't rule them out completely. So I make my own notes. And I make notes of what they've said about the property too. But sometimes you'll find that you'll go back and buy a house that they said no on. So it says set the next appointment. And I don't do that because we're on a mission together. And so if they have the availability to go out the very next day and something pops up, then we have that agreement that we're going to go look at houses. So I'm on total buy-in. You know, if they're willing to look at everything that pops up, I am very available to them. Okay, so there's scripts in here. What if the prices drop? Well, right now, maybe they say they want to sleep on it. And what I do is, if it's something that I think that they really want, that they're really leaning toward, after I leave and at the end of the day, then I either, I usually try to call the agent rather than text them, but find out if there are any offers that have come in. And then that often will prompt a buyer. We just are not in the market in Eugene to be able to have the luxury of sleeping on it and if they're really interested in the property. And if there is a listing that maybe you looked at it the first day that it was listed, but they say that they're not going to review offers for 3 or 4 days, then you have some flexibility to wait. And you also have the flexibility to look at it a second time if they're going to hold to that process where they will review offers 2 or 3 days later. Regroup and rethink. If you've shown them more than the average number of homes and your buyers have not made an offer, it's time to go back to the drawing board. In this market, that may not always be the case. I haven't found it all that difficult, even though we have a low inventory. I just haven't found it all that difficult to find properties for my buyers. So, but again, it's a two-way street. You have to have buyers that are willing to work with you as well. And sometimes they're, if you narrow down what you're showing them, it makes that decision-making process a little bit easier. Part of the problem that happens is when you can't find a house in the neighborhood that they want. So that can be a really difficult time. Okay, so let's see, looks like this is. Any questions?
Yes, I do have a question. So you mentioned that you never really experienced much difficulties to find a house your buyers like. So what is your secret? I mean, if they're a first-time home buyer, they have a fixed or like a lower budget, how do you find a house for them?
Well, those lower budget ones are really hard because in today's market, because if it's a house that requires a lot of fixing, then it's a matter of getting the financing for them. But most of the time, once they've looked at, part of the process for them is that they're out there looking on Zillow or Realtor.com or your KW app. They're out there looking for houses at the same time. And so they see what's available in their price point. So today's buyer is a lot more knowledgeable about houses that are out there than it was even a few years ago. And particularly with COVID, where there's, was fewer and fewer open houses, they really relied on the research that they did on their own. So it's a combination of them being informed and looking for themselves. And oftentimes the house that I sell to a buyer is one that they found themselves that I didn't find. I may show it to them, but they may have found it before I did. So it's kind of it's a two-way street. It's just working with your buyer and then listening well to what they want, but then also just being very mindful of what is out there on the market. When you only have a 2-week inventory and it's been anywhere from 2 weeks to 1 month, that's across all price points. So if your buyer is like under $350,000, there's going to be a lot of competition for that house, particularly if it's cute and it's well decorated or has been updated. Okay. All right, so let's see. It says, be proactive when it comes to communicating as you both try to find the home on the internet. Establish how they like to keep in touch, whether it's email, phone calls, or text messages. Talk to them about how often you'll be in touch. Is it every time a new house comes on the market? Plus a weekly communication to check in. Whatever you establish, stick to it. Also, you will be spending a lot of time with your buyers, so bring plenty of resources to cover any eventuality and make any experience as comfortable as possible. And I will say this about coming with plenty of resources. And I consider that to be in the summertime, making sure that you take a little cooler, have some chilled waters there, Powerball bars, or having some of that Premier Protein snacks, because it's amazing how the blood sugar can go really wonky with your buyers. So, and if you need to stop for lunch, depending on, what your time frame is for showing these houses, or just make sure that I bring those things, but then sometimes I'll make sure that I have, maybe some cookies or something along with, just have a little variety of things if you're going to be out for several hours. And the water is really important when it's summertime.
I have a quick question. Do you buy your clients lunch when you have to stop for lunch?
I usually do, yes. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I write it off as a business expense. I think you only get to write off about 50% of it, but I write it off, and it's just a goodwill gesture. And yeah, but I do. And I also have them sign at the buyer's agreement, broker-buyer agreement. I don't do it 100% of the time, but I try to do it. I try to get that signed. And here's one of the things that is one of those things that can happen in real estate. And sometimes our buyers are not as committed to us as we are to them. They may go to an open house. If they don't have a buyer broker agreement, and I witnessed this happen, it wasn't my client, but they had been shown a property the day before. And then, so they were showing it on a Friday. On Saturday, the listing agent had a open house. And so this buyer client went to the open house on their own, wanted to take a second look. They had also called their buyer agent, and the agent didn't get back to them. And they wanted to make an offer on that property. So when they went to the open house, the agent said, "Do you have a buyer broker agreement signed with anybody?" And that person said no. And that agent took that buyer, and the buyer wasn't committed to their buyer's agent. Again, no contract, and those things aren't terribly binding, but it plants it in that buyer's mind that you have an agreement with an agent. And but he didn't feel any loyalty particularly to that agent, and he reached out that morning and hadn't got a call back. And so that agent worked both ends of that transaction. It's not illegal in Oregon. I've never done it, and I tell my sellers that I won't do it. And so if I do get a buyer client, then I take a 25% referral and I refer it to one of the other Keller Williams agents. But that's just me personally. I won't do it. But if I had a cash deal and it was pretty simple, I might consider it. But most of the time, part of my listing presentation to my sellers, I tell them that I won't work both ends of the deal. And that's just a personal choice, because if it gets nasty, I just feel like I would have a hard time representing both sides well. And I want to be able to fight for my seller, or I want to be able to fight for my buyer. And I just don't think that I could do both. But I would highly recommend that you get the buyer broker agreement with your clients, just to avoid situations like that. Okay, so it talks about items to take. One of the things that I invested in that I have used a lot, and that's one of those laser pointer measuring devices. I think I paid $50 for it, and I bought it at Jerry's Building Supply. And so oftentimes somebody will say, "Well, how tall are these ceilings?" And so I just pull that out of my purse, and I can measure the ceiling height right away. And when you pull that out for sellers, when you're measuring their rooms and stuff, they like think that you're genius. And so it's pretty funny, but that is one of the things that I do. And I do take, I take my pictures with my camera, the camera on my phone often if I think it's a house that they like. And if there's just a detail in there that I want to remember, I will take a picture. But here it says take office supplies. Oh yeah, when I hand out those clipboards to my buyers, I attach a pen to it with a string, so because it's easy to drop your pen or whatever. But I do that. I attach that to my clipboard. And it says paper goods, tissues, and toilet paper. Oh, and the toilet paper does remind me. I've never taken tissues and toilet paper, but there are people that have, it's kind of 50-50 on whether you should use somebody else's restroom. But having shown a lot of people through and even been on, 5 or 6 houses in a day myself, and I coach all of my sellers, just know that people are going to use these restrooms in your house. And it doesn't happen very often, but it does happen. And the other thing that I do is that when I have a listing, and if it's a vacant house, I go to the dollar store and I buy the dinner napkins that are a long rectangular dinner napkin. They come in colors, and like right now they have some out that have pumpkins on them or fall flowers. And I put those in each of the bathrooms, and I buy from the dollar store the little hand soap. Now this is for vacant houses or houses that I have staged. And then I put a wastebasket in there too, because that there are going to be people that are going to use that bathroom. And if that vacant house doesn't have toilet paper, then I put toilet paper in there. That's just part of what I consider my job as a listing agent. So, and then it says here to have entertainment for kids. And I have not had many buyer clients that have brought their kids. I'm trying to think if I've had any. Not a bad idea if you have clients that have to bring their kids, but I generally ask them not to bring their kids if they have kids. And like when I was in Portland, we were just, we were going back and forth between these. It was going to be several hours and stuff. And so I try to discourage them from bringing kids. They get distracted. They don't really see the house as well. The kids don't like it, or the kids are into everything and they're jumping on the sofas or throwing a pillow around or something like that. So I discourage having kids come in. Okay, so it looks like page 32 is, if we were meeting, we would have break into breakout sessions. So I think we can pass on that one. Okay, so it says putting it all together, we have an action plan. So this action plan is for you to complete your daily Ken 4, enter numbers in your tracker, continue to preview and visit homes to practice touring and identifying features. And I don't know, because we're not having broker tours on Wednesdays through the MLS like we had been prior, I'd highly encourage you to go ahead and just visit houses. When you see houses that are listed with open houses, or if they're vacant, just text the listing agent, and just tell them that you're previewing the house. It doesn't mean that you have to have a client. Book an appointment, particularly if it's vacant, but if it's an owner-occupied house, I probably wouldn't ask to book an appointment, but definitely vacant houses, I just tell the agent that I'm previewing the house for a client, whether I have a client or not. If you can also say to the listing agent, look, I'm new. I'd just like to get a feel for the houses that are out there in the market. Either way, they're going to be fine with that. They're not going to discourage you. If they are, that's shame on them. It says practice your buyer scripts and objection handlers, and do that with a friend or a spouse or partner. Good idea to do that. And then it says complete your mission for the next class. And you always have this prepare for the next class is a standard in all of Ignite, and takes action, prepare your list. Okay. All right, so recall and remember. So this is a time where we just want to, this looks like it's, so let's see, no, that you don't have. Recall and remember. Okay, it says, how should you qualify homes found online? It says, check the MLS and the listing agent, compare the features with your buyer's wish list, and look for comparable properties close by or for more efficient showings. And again, in a short market or a tight market, we don't often have the ability to find a lot of houses in the same neighborhood, but we're only about 20 minutes to any place here in town, so that's not quite as difficult. It says, why is it important to not make comments when touring a home with your buyers? And it says, this will let your buyers come to their own conclusions. This will help determine if the house is a match for them. I recently had a conversation with someone who was not my client, but she was telling me an experience that her daughter had buying a house in another city here in the state. And the agent was a new agent and had highly discouraged this buyer from buying a particular house. And so the buyer was talking to her mother and she said, I really want to buy that house. It's the right house for me for a lot of reasons. It's not my forever house, but and she was going through a divorce and needed to sell her property and to buy something lesser than what she had before so she could afford it. And so she did go ahead and make that offer, but the agent was discouraging her from buying that house when in fact it was one that really, for a lot of reasons, fit her financial and her short-term needs. And fast forward, it's 2 years later and she's getting ready to sell the house and she's now met somebody else. And so they're going to buy a house together and buy a better house. But for 2 years, the house worked fine for her. She's going to make money on the house. So it didn't turn out to be a bad buy. So it is really important to be careful about what you say in terms of negative comments about a particular house until your clients have kind of voiced some opinion about the house. And then, you know, some of the negatives about a house are going to be self-explanatory to your buyers anyway. What are the differences between benefits and features? Features are attached to the property, benefits are attached for the buyers, or attached to the buyers. What is the difference between benefits and features? Interesting. Okay. Why is raising objections considered a buying signal? And it says that when buyers raise objections, it means that the buyers are beginning to imagine themselves in the home. Okay, so would anybody like to share their ahas from the presentation today?
Well, I learned a lot of new things, how to negotiate and make your offer powerful in favor to your buyers. That was a great part of our class today.
I wanted to say that I really liked the examples that you gave of doing something that may in the moment seem like out of your comfort zone or a little bit excessive or, you know, a little bit beyond the call or whatever, and how that can pay off. And I really enjoyed that part. And I'm going to be using that. Not to, you know, not to give my labor away for free, but just for that delayed gratification.
Yeah, it's a funny business because we don't get paid until we see this all the way to the end. And so one of the things that I keep in mind as in terms of a mindset is that I approach everything, whether when I have a listing, that's a little bit different. But when I'm representing a buyer, it would never cross my mind that I wasn't going to find this person a house. It's just not something that comes to my mind because they once we know that we've got them pre-approved, they've got their down payments, or even if they don't have their down payment, there's USDA loans today that you can, for first-time home buyers, where you can put an earnest money down and put no down payment. So it's still very attractive. Interest rates are low. It's just a great time for people to be buying houses. And so I don't ever think that I'm not going to find them a house. That one example of the lady that I said that ghosts me every few months, she is the only one that I've had that I've shown properties to in the 4+ years that I've been in the business that I haven't sold a house to. And I call her my project, and I don't know if I ever will. At this point, I'm pretty fed up with her because she even came back after, this was earlier, about the same time that we had that, we're looking at that house that was the mid-century modern house for her. When we started looking, she said, you know, there were 2 houses last year that you showed that I wish I would have bought. And that was a big clue to me, because then I figured out which houses those were. And later we did make an offer on one house, and it was gorgeous. It had everything she wanted. It was really a nice house. And it had just come on the market. And she said to me in the parking lot, we looked at 3 houses that morning. It was a beautiful Saturday morning. And so she says, well, we looked at that house. It was nice that we ultimately did make an offer on. She said, I'm just going to have to think about it. So I said, okay. And I'm pretty easygoing about that sort of thing. But at this particular time, all of a sudden, I wasn't so cool about it, because the house was perfect. It had everything. And again, she had told me well, it wasn't that day. It was a few days, you know, just say within the last couple of weeks that we were back looking at houses, that there were those other 2 houses that she had not bought that she wished that she had. So I started to get into my car as we were leaving. And then I kind of lost my cool, and I was not happy with myself in one way. And the other way, I was proud of myself for sticking up for myself. So I went back and I said, you know, I said, I want to revisit this one house, that rather than you just going back and thinking about it like overnight or whatever, these houses are not, you know, and this house isn't going to last very long. And I said, she says, well, I just have a hard time making a decision about spending the money. And I said, you know, it's not about the money. You already told me that there were the houses, those 2 houses last year that you wish that you would have purchased. If you were concerned about the money, you would have bought the houses last year. You couldn't touch those houses today if you paid another $50,000 to $80,000 for them. That's how much money you cost yourself from not making a decision last year. So it's not about the money. You don't care about losing out on the money. And I said, and secondly, she currently lives with one of her children. They rent a house together, and there's a teenage grandson as well. And I said, and I said, I have been single for a long time. And I said, I can tell you, you said to me that you would like to meet someone. Again, she's 74 years old, and she'd gone through a divorce in the last, I don't know, let's just say 5 years, because I really don't know the answer to that. But I said, you said that you wanted to meet somebody to at least be able to have wine and have dinner with together and have a social life with. And I said, but because I've been single for a long time, I can tell you that you are not going to meet somebody that is going to be a good companion when all that you have in terms of real estate is that 10 by 12 bedroom that you have, and you live with your daughter, son-in-law, and high school age grandson. It's just not going to happen. It's not going to put your wish list together when you don't have your own house. And there was a third thing, and I can't remember now what it was that I said, but by the time that I got finished with my rant, she said, okay, write the offer. So we did. It didn't get accepted, but I was, I'd already showed her houses off and on for a year. And again, she would ghost me like for 3 or 4 months at a time. So it wasn't, I don't know how many houses I'd actually shown her. But anyway, sometimes it really, it's probably the only time that in the 4.5 years that I've been in the business that I have really taken a client to task on their let me think it over kind of thing. So I don't know. Maybe I burned her because she never has bought a house. We did look at more houses after that, but then she just decided she wanted to take the summer off and go and travel and do fun things. And it's like, okay, must not be a priority. So I didn't make it a priority for myself either. So, all right, any other questions?
Yes, I have a final question. So when you work with your buyers, besides looking for property on in the open market, have you ever tried to find a property kind of like off the market? Like if you know someone who is going to sell the house and you just hook them up, just something like that.
No. No, I only work with listings that are active, that I have sellers that are wanting to sell and buyers that are wanting to buy. I just don't waste my time doing it. I think it would be very difficult. And then again, you put yourself, then you could be potentially working both sides of the deal and yeah.
I see. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. I mean, and it's your business, it's your business to make your own. And if you think that that's something that you want to do, by all means, go for it. But to me, you have a better chance because you don't have to convince anybody to sell, because you're trying to find something that a buyer wants to buy and a seller wants to sell. And you're just better. Your law of averages are better if you deal with something that's a listed property.
Yeah, I wonder if it's possible to kind of reach out to the agent network to see if someone has a seller and you have a buyer, you can work together and get the deal done faster.
With a property that's currently listed?
No, not listed yet.
Okay.
Just kind of like do something like a off the market deal.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to play the listing agent side and give you that perspective. Why would I not want to bring my property that I'm representing the seller? Why would I not want to bring it to the marketplace and to let the market tell me what this property is worth? And a prime example is the house that I was telling you about that I listed last week, and we went live on Tuesday. And the original sales price was going to be $285,000. And I had done that because we had gotten a bid from terra firma for the foundation for $29,000. And so then I got a second bid for the seller, and terra firma is a real high tech. And if I had a house, it was a cliffhanger house, and I was having foundation issues, I'd hire terra firma in a heartbeat, because they drill down into the ground 3 or 4 feet and they put in some really substantial supports. But this was a house on flat land. And so I got a second quote, and that quote came in at $4,000. So I went to my seller and I said, okay, I think we can, if you'll agree to pay this $4,000, I think that we can raise the list price of this house to $299,000. So she said, okay, fine. Because that was $14,000 more than what we had originally planned, less the $4,000. So that was still $10,000 more that she was going to be getting from this property. And she'd already made up her mind that she was willing to take the $285,000. So when we brought it to market, I had no idea that we were going to get the kind of offers that we did, but because it was a big lot, a lot of the investors came in and they were thinking about subdividing the property. And then the other people, there were family people that liked the big yard, and that's what they wanted. So that house sold then for $330,000. So being the listing agent, so you have a buyer, big deal. There's buyers out there. I would, from a listing agent side, I would see no benefit to me representing the seller just because you have a buyer that I would want to sell it to you. I would want to bring it to the marketplace so that my seller can get the most money for their property. And again, you need a willing seller and a willing buyer. And when you're out there trying to prospect for sellers, I would be prospecting sellers from the standpoint of being that listing agent, not looking for a property for my buyer. And I would just use the MLS and potentially, I guess, for sale by owners. But I've never actually, I worked on one for sale by owner and never was able to develop that. And so I just stick with people that are wanting to sell their houses. I don't go out and try to drum up that business, but there's some people that are good at it and they like to do it. That's just not my deal. But does that kind of explain the pros and cons of your question?
Yes, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of hard in the beginning to sort of understand where to spend your time. And certainly, if you're trying to find houses for sale, and that's what they used to say that the gold was really in getting the listings, because with the listings, potentially you could get another couple buyer clients. And but right now the market's been so crazy that we haven't even been able to have open houses on all of them. They sometimes go into contract before that happens. And there's lots of ways that when you have a listing, you can door knock the neighborhood and try to find out if there's any other neighbors that are getting ready to sell. And you can do mailers, just sold or just listed. But, by the time that you get those things mailed out in today's market, the houses have already sold. So, and before we had this coming soon, no showing classification, we could actually do postcard mailers of coming soon. And I did that a lot. And so I used to generate a lot of interest in properties by, if I had a property that wasn't coming on the market for 2 or 3 weeks, that it's probably more the neighbors that were just out of curiosity, but my open houses were really well attended, but they won't let us do that anymore. The only way you can do it is through the coming soon, no showing notice on the MLS website. But. So anybody else? Either ahas or questions?
I really liked when you said become a source of information for your clients, because it's a way for you that even if they're not prospective clients at that moment for you to buy or sell a house, you're making that connection with them and they'll keep that in mind. Yeah,
and I'll tell you an interesting story too about being collecting sources. Somebody had posted on our KWR RES Facebook page about needing somebody to either clean a house or clean windows, something like that. And so I took down this contact information, just put it in my phone, and I had a listing that came up, and I was trying to, it was going to help me clean this property. So I reached out to this person, and turns out that they lived in my same neighborhood and where I had this listing. But I asked them to come, and I wanted them to power wash the house, and I wanted the windows cleaned and some other things that needed to be done. And so I really connected with the guy. He was just a fun guy, and he was able to get this seller to do things that I wasn't able to do in terms of getting this place cleaned up. And that guy lost my business card. And so one day he was driving home from work, and so he turns on my street because he was going to go and knock on my door because he'd lost my business card. And so I happened to meet him at the end of the street, and I was leaving to go someplace else. And he said, "Hey, I'm getting ready to sell my house." I go, "Perfect." Because he was waiting for his wife to, she wanted to do a bunch of painting and this and that. But anyway, I ended up selling his house, and consequently, they did buy another place, but it was just a mobile home because they weren't planning to stay in Eugene. They were going to move out of town. But anyway, they've been looking at another property as well. So ultimately, I'll end up getting 2 transactions out of that. And that's out of just me taking that contact information that I used for another client, but then I ultimately ended up selling as a house. So you just never know where your buys and sells are going to come from. So just kind of a unique story, but that's the thing about real estate, is that you just don't know. And one thing that I would say to you is I would hesitate saying negative things about your business, like complaining to a family member, because this year I have done 3 transactions for family members, which I never thought in my wildest dreams that I would ever do any transactions. They were all out of town. So I didn't think I would ever do anything with my family. And I found myself complaining to one of the persons. And little did I know that they were going to be looking at buying a house. I had no idea. I never asked, but so anyway, so I would just caution you about negative input, or even, not negative input, but just talking negative about what you do. And the other thing that I would say is that a lot of people have no idea, well, most people have no idea how the real estate business works. And this week I had kind of a disappointing thing happen. I have a friend that I've had for probably 30 years, and I fully expected, her husband died in a tragic accident about 7 years ago. And I'm from the East Coast, and so I fully expected that she was going to move to the East Coast. So she calls me up this week and she said, I've got something to tell you. And I go, oh, you're moving. And she says, well, yes, but, and I thought to the East Coast. And she says, no, I already bought a property. And she said it never came to market. And I go, oh, great. But by the same token, she's going to sell her house, but her sister, who lives out of town, had asked her if she would work with her daughter and give her daughter the listing. Well, she had no idea, and I didn't fully explain it to her even afterwards because it was too late. But of course, the daughter's going to take a referral fee, and the bulk of the money is going to go to somebody else that within the same company that she works for, that she's referring it to. So, while she's helping her family member by 25 or 30%, but the bulk of the money is going to go to this total stranger, which she could have referred it to me. So sometimes I think that we can give family members or friends some of that kind of information from time to time, so that they kind of understand how the business works, and so that you don't cut yourself out of transactions, because that ended up being about $1 million worth of transaction in both. There's nothing I could do about somebody who had an off-market property that she had discovered. And it could have been somebody that she knew. I didn't ask for particulars, but because it was too late, she was already going to close here in another week or so. But this is somebody that I had known. I was extremely close to her, so, but she just doesn't know how the business works. And so she just thought that if she didn't use her family member, that she was going to get kicked out of the family. So she had to do that. But she didn't understand that I could have benefited greatly from it, and done just equally as good a job or better from this total stranger. So
That's very frustrating.
yeah, it was a little bit of a bummer day, particularly because I'm ready to cap, and so it would have been 100% commission. So I was like, oh, I could just, I could see my new kitchen evaporating. So, but it happens, and in the whole scheme of things, you have to keep the good face on, because you still want to be their friends. And so, I've had a number of those that have happened. But so I would say, in a parting comment to our session today, to really don't be afraid to talk about your business in a positive way, and so, sometimes when they want us to do a call list and stuff like that, is asking for the referrals. It's far easier to ask for a referral And the other thing is, and if you get real busy, you know, that you never know who your next buyer is going to be. So you don't want to say how swamped you are, because then they think, well, you're too busy to handle my listing or whatever. So it's kind of a slippery slope sometimes about sharing what's going on in your business life, because we're only as good as our current trade. We're always looking for the next one. So, but keeping your circle of friends and family informed about how the business works is really important. And I'll just leave you with one story. My brother lives in Hefner, and Hefner is about a 6-hour drive from here. And there's only 1,200 people that live in Hefner. And so he called me up one day and he said, hey, I have this rental, and I want to retire. I don't want to work anymore, and I want to get rid of my rentals. And so I said, well, send me some pictures of the house. And he says, but he had pulled up the property taxes, and it had a market value of, and if you own a house yourself, you know that the market value isn't anywhere close to as high as what we can sell a house for. So it was for about $80,000. And this was a little house. It was about 700 square feet, and property does not sell for a lot of money over there. And he had fixed it up super cute, and a new paint job, new roof, all kinds of stuff. It was cute. And so he ran into a lady who was a retired appraiser at the post office that week. And he told her that he wanted to sell and what she thought about the house. Well, I don't know how long ago that she had retired, but he told her it was worth $80,000 on the tax statement. And she goes, oh yeah, that's about right. So he called me up and he said, I've got a couple people that are wanting to buy this house. And he said, and so told me the story about how this appraiser told him it was worth about $80,000. So I said, well, look, I don't know anything about your Hefner market. Let me do a little bit of research. Don't do anything until I call you back. So I looked up real quick, and I found that the only house, most of the houses over there that had sold in the last year even, were built in the 1900s. This house was built in the 50s. So there was only one house that had sold that was a 1950s vintage that was about the same size as his house. He had a garage and a carport, one on each side of the house, which gave me more parking area than the house that I was using as a comp. So I had one comp, and it had sold for $119,900, and it had sold a full year before, maybe a year and a half, but at least a year. And so I called him and I said, hey, this other house sold for $119,000. And he said, well, you can call me up any day with information like that. And I said, well, when you get ready, because he had some work yet that he wanted to finish, I said, let me know and I'll stage it for you. That was a big mistake on my part, because I didn't realize how expensive it was going to be for me to rent a vehicle to go over there to stage that house. So I ended up probably not making any money on it, but I was able to list that house for him at $145,000. And here he had that appraiser that told him that it was, yeah, it's worth about $80,000. Again, she was a retired appraiser. But if you'd have told me that I would have sold a property for my brother, who, you know, lives in Hefner and stuff, because he and I don't talk a lot, and I'm real close to his daughters, but not to him. I mean, he's a hunter and a fisher, and I live in Eugene. You know, it's like two different lifestyles, and we get along. It's just that we don't talk a lot. So anyway, that was my funny story about selling property for a lot. You know, it was fun for him to be able to make so much more money. And he said to me, if I make anything over 100,000, if I make on that house, I'm going to be happy. Here's the crazy thing about the house. He'd actually bought it for $12,000 20 years ago, and he gutted it and rewired it and fixed it all up in his spare time, because he had a business that was a refrigeration and air conditioning job. And so when he wasn't busy, he'd just spend his time fixing this house up. So he came out really good on that little house. And so I'm going to do another one for him that he has to sell in the springtime. But anyway, I'll quit telling my stories. It's been a pleasure. Reach out to me either by phone or email if you want any of the documents that I talked about, the spreadsheet example, or that shopping the buyer information from the Oregon Association of Realtors. That's really powerful information, I find. And just know, if you're using that thing about shopping the buyer, that not all agents will tell you what kind of offers they have and the pricing, but it isn't illegal. And I did find that when I had one of the 2 listings last week, that I did have 2 other agents that said, I don't know if you can tell me, but do you have permission from your seller to reveal what your offers are? And that was the first time in 4.5 years that I've had any agent that's asked me for that. So maybe a few more of them are coming around to using it. But anyway, it's been a pleasure. Reach out. I don't mind sharing my time and what advice that I can share with you. So enjoy your new career and don't give up. It's a fun job.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's been very informative.
Thank you.
I'm going to check out this, see if there was anything else that anybody was here before I actually sign off. And it looks like, okay. It looks like everybody else has answered questions.
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you all. I appreciate you. Bye now.